Welcome to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast, where we talk to IT marketing leaders about how to drive more sales. Hosted by Carlos Corredor, founder of Condor, an Inc. 5000 company and one of the fastest growing IT marketing agencies in the US.
3, 2, 1, 0.
This episode is brought to you by Condor, a digital marketing agency for mid-market IT services companies. Most IT marketing teams struggle to drive sales, overwhelmed by long sales cycles and an elusive audience. Condor helps you measure and generate a qualified pipeline, make the most with your budget, and be recognized as a revenue driver and not just a cost center. You can learn more at condoragency.com. In today's episode, we want to welcome Ellie Behling, who has been working in tech marketing for more than 15 years. She, like me, started as a journalist and then shifted towards marketing. She is currently the content director at Modus Create, which is a consulting firm that specializes in transformation across the business, including lifecycle product development, platform modernization, and digital operations. And we're excited to talk about how content has evolved over time, for marketing, obviously. So welcome, Ellie, and before we start our discussion, was that a fair summary of your background and of Modus Create, or would you add anything there?
Yeah, I would say that was a really good summary. And like you said, I started as a journalist, and I still consider myself a professional information gatherer and disseminator, which is really what you learn as a journalist, right?
Yeah, definitely. And also, I in my case, I was a sports journalist at the beginning, but I think that the storytelling portion, which is a lot of times forgotten in marketing, it comes in really handy.
It really does. And honestly, that's how, I got into marketing because I worked for B2B trade magazines, and really they are doing B2B content marketing. Like, that's what they are doing. And we have a lot to learn really from B2B media, which I know has had some challenges, just like any media companies, but their whole model is based on, let's do great editorial to reach our target audience and then also sell them marketing services.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really how I learned. I'm like, when B2B content marketing became a term, kind of like in my early career, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what I'm already doing,
Yeah. And I remember, for example, I went to school for communications, and I majored in, I guess, both. Well, it's part journalism and part advertising. It's a mix. But what I was getting is, they taught us how to write a news article, right? It's something that you've been reading newspapers all of your life, but you don't really know that there's a science behind writing something as simple as a news article, right? So for a relatively straightforward, situation that happened, right? You have to start with the date and the where and the who. You have to immediately say what happened. Then you have to explain a little bit of and then obviously you have to have some instinct on what people are going to ask themselves and answer that right away. But what I'm saying is, even though you read news all the time and you interpret them, not anyone can write a news article well. Whereas in marketing, they take it for granted that anyone can come and write a piece of copy, whether that's for a Google ad or a blog post or even something as important as your homepage, right? So that's something that I think, it takes expertise, and it's somewhat underrated. I think people know, wow, well, he's a journalist, right? He's prepared, but it's like, oh no, anyone can write that as long as they know a little bit about the company and a little bit about marketing. And I don't think that's the case.
It really isn't. And that is a huge challenge, I think, when you're a content director. A lot of people in my situation, are usually pretty small teams. Like in my case, I'm the content director and I have a content marketing manager, and we outsource a lot of stuff. And then also part of our job is engaging the rest of the company to participate. And really what you become is a gatekeeper, especially now, right? With the rise of tools and stuff that just makes it really easy to spit out content, but is it good? You know? So I think our role is becoming even more gatekeepers. So some of that in college, you just gave me a flashback to writing the nut graph of a newspaper article and all that structure. But I was the managing editor of our newspaper, our print newspaper, which doesn't even exist anymore at Ohio University. And that's where I learned a lot of what's helpful to my job today. It's really about being a managing editor, about having the editorial standards of like what fits and what doesn't. It might not be as stringent as what actually literally fits in a newspaper, but we still have to have that editorial hat on and be the gatekeepers in B2B.
Yeah. And in marketing, what happens if you don't, or how, I guess the question is, what's your criteria as an editor? Because in the newspaper, for example, it's okay, you have to have a lot of instinct. You also have to know the line of the editorial line of the publisher in this case. Obviously the grammar behind it, right? The length. You have to know if you have said something about that topic in recent days, or so that maybe that's what impacts a newspaper editorial. But what in your case, do you think should impact a marketing, let's say, version of an editorial?
Yeah, and it is funny. I think there is a lot of overlap, but it actually always frustrated me in the newspaper world, because there was always this idea of, we want to say what we want to say. And that's how I learned that I wanted to be in marketing, because I'm like, no, we need to say what the audience wants to hear. And the truth is, though, that's the overlap. And so today, when I'm coming up with the content, I think of it as three aspects. One is, of course, you have to understand, what is it we do want to say? Like, what are we selling? What are our capabilities? And then you're not going to directly push that, of course, in good content marketing, but you want it to be the top of the funnel that ties back to those capabilities somehow, right? So first we're like, what do we want to say? And also, let's make sure we have people uniquely positioned to say it, right? Like, is this a topic that we have experts in? And then there's, what do people want to hear? And there's an art and a science to that. That's understanding your industry and your target audience. But honestly, that's where I use search data more than anything. Like, what are people searching for around this topic? What's the appetite? And I think that's very important, by the way, with SEO, is to bring it into your topic ideation, not the end when you're optimizing, right? And then the third aspect is a little bit more ambiguous. And again, it's understanding your market. And that is what's already being said. Where can you find, like, it's good if it's kind of a tough balance. You don't want to say what everyone's already saying. Like, I'm not going to rate one of our big targets would be the CIO. And that's a big target for a lot of tech marketers. That's the golden persona. And I'm not going to just write, okay, here's the top trends in AI that CIO needs to hear. Because if you Google that, there's already too many articles about it. But it tells me there's an appetite for it, but can I find some white space? Is there an angle we can take that's not already being covered? Mm-hmm. So those are the ways. That was overly long description, but those are the three aspects that work together, when you're coming up with a topic
that you use, let's say, to filter, as you mentioned, right? Being the gatekeeper of perhaps your own team is coming up with ideas, or also someone might be leveraging AI and can come up with even 10 blog posts, in an hour, and say, hey, here, let's publish these 10 blog posts, right? And has that happened to you, whether in this position or before? Like, have you learned the hard way that you need to be a gatekeeper, and what are the risks of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a balance. I'm not going to pretend like I've totally figured it out, right? There's different, I think you have to leverage the different type of content creators at your organization, right? So say you have an executive team, there's going to be people that are so excited and have blog post ideas and get it and want to work with you. And then there's going to be people that you really have to pull the insights from, that that you have to say, what you just said is a great blog post. And then there's people that are just going to be overly eager, right? And are going to be just pumping out a lot of blog posts, and you actually want to say less is more, right? So you have to just learn how to nurture those different types of content creators. And I mean, the good news is, the reason why I was like getting so into the topic stuff is I think that's where it's really important, is to be more of a gatekeeper around the insights, because it's going to get easier and easier to edit a piece. If somebody has a good idea, it can be a good piece. We have so many tools for that, to make that happen. But say if you can't, you get out what you feed. Say if you're using an AI tool, you're going to get out what you feed it. So it needs to be original, interesting insights. So that's where I feel like you have to be more the gatekeeper. Is this a good topic? I mean, anybody can fix the grammar,
Yeah, totally. And what I think that obviously being a journalist and also working in marketing for a long time, right? It gives you that instinct. But is it something that you can teach, right? Like, can you teach someone that it's, fresh out of college or starting, or maybe let's say they're an expert digital marketer, but maybe not a content creator, and now you want to leverage that person for that purpose in your team, right? Any advice on how to be either a good gatekeeper or simply come up with polished, ready to publish content pieces without needing a gatekeeper like you?
So for example, say you're the one marketing person or something at a tech which is very common in B2B tech marketing. I've been the one woman show before. And then you kind of have to know a little bit about performance, and you also need to know content creation. It's a great question, because in my experience, quite honestly, you either have a content instinct or you don't. But I think most good marketers do have a content instinct, even if that's not their core. Just like I feel like I'm going to always have a performance instinct of what to do, how to target an audience. I think it's part of being a good marketer. And like, I just don't even think people make it, quite frankly, to step 2 in their marketing career without having some kind of understanding of content these days. I don't know. I'd be curious what you think about that. To me, it's like it's a prereq. Like you can't even be doing paid media ads without having some sense of content.
Yeah. No, I think you have to. Firstly, you need to have a point of view that, as you mentioned, right, is not the commonplace. So, for example, Reagan and I go, yeah, AI, yeah, you need to, get on the AI wave for 2025. It's like, I mean, that's obvious, right? Or AI in marketing is a trend, right? But like, what about AI, right? And now everybody's using ChatGPT. So, yeah, that's obvious. You're not helping anyone. And I always tell my team, it's like putting your shoes off. And I actually name a client contact, that we work with, that it's a VP of marketing, that it's a it's someone that they can relate to, and they can picture that person reading that article. And I say, do you think that person is going to read this and is going to find it insightful and is going to make decisions based on it? And they're like, yeah, probably not. Okay, why not? And then it's about, most of the time it's about give them practical examples. First of all, be clear on what you're trying to say or what you're recommending, right? or give them practical examples and specific examples. I think, you know, you now with all of the tools, they'll give you trends, right? And data and numbers. But it's like, well, okay, 60% of companies are looking to increase their investment in AI. All right, so what? That means that I have to turn around and tell the CEO to give me 60% more budget for my marketing team, so I have to go from 1 million to 1.6 million. Is that what you're telling me? No, I'm not saying that. Okay, well then what exactly are you saying? Then, you know, he said, well, then maybe you have to invest in infrastructure, and these are the 3 tools to start building agents. You have Microsoft Copilot here, right? These are then now open forms. So if you are, you know, if you're an enterprise company and you're using Microsoft, start looking into Microsoft Copilot. Now we're getting into something that it's actually educating me as opposed to sounding like an expert. I think a lot of, especially junior people, they want to sound like an expert, and there's no shortcut, right? It's like, what is your recommendation? What are you trying to say? What's your point of view? And help me, you know, make decisions, you know, help me take action. So I think that would be that's a starting point. I think it's a challenge, but I think it's good that there's not an exact formula, because otherwise there will be a lot of content that you have to, you know, with AI, there's just a lot of content out there, and at least having this instinct helps you make sure that you're putting out content that is valuable. I don't know what's your take on watching out with not saturating your audience with AI content that is actually going to end up having your brand diminished. And, you know, I suppose it's better to say 3 insightful things than 20 that are just okay, or, you know, mediocre in general.
That is huge. And we are definitely all about that. And you mentioned one of the huge editorial standards that we have is we're not there to, sometimes maybe we might curate some interesting things people say, or we might talk about trends, but 90% of our content is always addressing a direct challenge. And, you know, if before we even go into the creation phase, it's always, what is the challenge we're addressing here?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like, we can use trends and research to shape that challenge, but we're all about like, what is the practical guide to your AI strategy? That's one of our best performing pieces was really early on this year, just very practical overview for an executive on just where do you start, you know, with AI, rather than just talking about a type to type. But AI content fatigue is so real, and it's just definitely a challenge. It's just, I mean, it's almost just comical how much everyone is talking about it. And I mean, and B2B, it was already well documented that just B2B content fatigue is so real. There's just too much stuff being said. So we are definitely all about less is more. Luckily, sometimes you get a lot of pushback on that. Luckily, you know, I'm trusted with that at Modus Create, where that's what the executive leadership, you know, understands and wants is, let's say less things, but say really good things. You know, I'm glad, but there's still a lot of strategies out there that are very based on like, let's just pop up as much content as we can, that are still chasing Google search, which is, you know, probably a tough thing to be doing because search and how we find content is changing so much. So you don't want your whole strategy based on that. But really, I think what it comes down to is it's pushing ourselves to find more original things to say and to be more creative. So I think creativity is really what wins with B2B content. And it's a lot harder to do. I mean, I have not fully figured that out, but that's what I think what really breaks through is original thought and creatively presenting that. not just creativity in what you say, but also creativity in how you say it, trying different ways of connecting.
Mm-hmm. And when you mentioned that, what I got from what you were saying about being less dependent on traditional Google search, I assume you're also referring about the growth of people finding content either via simply AI chats, ChatGPT, for example, or Perplexity, also social media in general. And is that the case? If am I missing anything from your comment? And what should you do differently besides focusing on quality, right? Over quantity to embrace that shift in user behavior?
Yeah, it's a great question. You are getting it right. I think that if you have, a three-legged stool, I think that SEO is still one of those legs. Like it's still, like I was mentioning earlier, especially in figuring out what people want to hear about, right? Like using it to help inform your topics. But I think the days of being SEO driven are not, is not going to be as effective. But so I look at it more like, oh, search is just embedded in everything we do. We use it a little bit in topic ideation. We make sure content is optimized. But more and more, honestly, even if you were just writing for Google, Google is getting more and more advanced where it wants you to have high quality content. So rather than focusing on being search driven, just focusing on high quality content that's going to, honestly, I would think of it as what performs well on LinkedIn. I hesitate to say that because I don't want us to all put all of our eggs in the basket of a platform that just wants to, own all of our content. But I think that I look at it more as what is interesting to people in the LinkedIn feed. And honestly, if you're writing that good stuff, and you're making sure it's just, optimized and user friendly and all of that stuff, it's going to work in Google too. So if you just start with great brand content, it's going to trickle down to be effective on every platform.
Yeah, that's a great, I think, rule of thumb, right? If you don't think this is going to do well on your LinkedIn feed, it's probably not going to do well in traditional search or even AI chats. I hadn't thought about it like that, but I think it's a very practical way of quickly knowing if you're just abusing keyword stuffing or SEO insights and are forgetting a little bit about saying something that is interesting, that is insightful, that somebody's going to read and remember you.
Right.
We're talking about, we've used the word content a lot. But what about the difference between simply generating content and telling a story, right? The concept of storytelling. How is that different, and how often or how common is it to be missed by marketers?
Oh, that's a good one. Storytelling is maybe overused, but I think it's just, I know I overuse the word storytelling a lot, but I think it's really the most important aspect of marketing today, truly, that just, are we telling a cohesive story? Like just and it's a huge issue having fragmented stories. Even at a small company, it's really easy to have too many messages, too many stories. I think starting with one cohesive brand story before you even produce the content. Like I know I was getting into tactics, but content is really a tactic. And if you don't have a cohesive story, cohesive messages to really ground your content strategy and your email strategy and just all of the tactics, you're not going to be as successful, right? I don't know if I'm even really answering your question. I'm just waxing poetic about this, but my role also, because it is a startup and I wear different hats, I am the communications person too. So I kind of put, I think, which is great. I think it's good to marry content and communications a little bit. So I am thinking about brand messaging and that sort of thing.
No, I hear you. And I think, if you don't know your story, how are you going to start putting yourself out there to the world, right? What are you going to say, right? If you don't know yourself, or obviously your company, all of the stories are simply going to sound empty or forced, or are not
Yeah.
going to be on brand, aligned with each other. So I totally get it. That's something that even we struggle ourselves when we started the agency, when we were trying to put a new service out there, or even adjust our vision on our target audience, right? You need to not only have that clear yourself, but also have your team know that and be clear about it, and also try to stick with it for a while, right? Because it's also a balance between, okay, we're adjusting our differentiator, we think this one is now stronger than the previous one, so let's go heavy on this one. So there's a balance there between consistency and flexibility to also, it's okay to renew yourself and your vision, but also a balance between how often you do that and the consistency of your message.
Yeah, and I do think I've as you probably noticed, it does seem like a lot of marketers, including myself, are constantly like brand, brand, brand. Like that's the new thing, is let's go back to brand. And it's easier said than done. I mean, honestly, I don't have time to just go into an ivory tower and work on the brand messaging framework all day. And no one's gonna want me to do that, right? So you have to do the strategy through the work. You have to, I work directly with our CEO a lot, and it's like we're working on the brand messaging and his next content piece simultaneously, So sometimes I get depressed reading LinkedIn thinking, who are these people that have time to do this? But the reality is, everyone has to do strategy through the work. And and also, one of my, you kind of touched on this, I think where we're headed to is a lot more personality in brand and in content, right? Just more like I'm really embracing, like, please, let's do first person, and that can be hard, like say if you're ghostwriting or something, but if say I'm interviewing you for a piece, you're going to use first person when you're talking to me. If I write that piece, I should encapsulate your personality. And consumer marketing, that's just known. You get email. I mean, it's Christmas time, so we have like 1 million emails from consumer marketers, right? And they have so much personality to them, and they're not afraid to be funny, to be real. And in B2B marketing, we shouldn't be afraid of that either, not force it. But so part of the storytelling aspect is making it human, making your brand human. I don't want to use the word empathy, but you have to use the word empathy, I guess. It's just such a buzzword, but really, I think I prefer just saying be human than be empathetic, because I think it's a more ambiguous phrase to say, what is empathy? But just being human, being real, having personality, not being afraid to show a little bit underneath the hood of your company. So anyways, that's where I think we're headed.
I think we have a lot to learn from traditional advertising in that sense. I, besides working in journalism, I also, my ex-girlfriend worked as a copywriter in Leo Burnett for, and we were together for 6 years, and I met her friends and the circle and how they thought and the creative process behind a simple banner for a magazine. And I'm not talking about a Super Bowl commercial. I'm talking about 3 words, in a package of orange juice, or a banner in a magazine, and the thought process, the brainstorming, the alternatives behind it, where they had to come up with 100, options, and then bring it down to 10. And obviously they need to have personality. They needed to have, a point of view. They needed to be sassy. They needed, it was okay to make mistakes. And then obviously, finally, once you drill down, you're going to find one that kind of like overlaps all of it. Its own brand, has personality, is funny, right? And but that's really how, yeah, it's a form of art in my opinion, right? So whereas now it's like, yeah, no, let's have the intern use our positioning PDF and write the homepage copy. It's like, yeah, I wish it would be that easy, you know. So I think we have a lot to learn from traditional copywriting in that sense.
Mhm.
And when you're reading something, you don't want to read some, especially now with AI, right? You can really tell if it's done by AI or if it's done by somebody that is not a writer, you know? But also it's like, well, we need to use AI, right? Ultimately, we need to leverage it, right? So how, like, you know, how are you guys coming about that, right? Because you cannot completely ignore AI. You need to leverage in a certain way, but also be a gatekeeper for it. But so do you have any advice or simply want to share any learnings from that, you know, challenge?
Absolutely. Hugely into figuring out how AI fits in. And some days it's daunting, like, I don't want to deal with this. It's learning something new. But that's when I think you have to step back and say, whenever I'm starting on something, the question I ask myself is like, where could ChatGPT help here first? Like, could it make the outline quicker? Could it help me synthesize some points from this interview? Like, everything still needs a human touch, which, to be honest, I think AI is getting better and better. And there might be parts of the process that we can really start outsourcing. Like, I'm pretty bullish about actual writing and what I've seen some more enterprise solutions, like what they're able to do. I'm really impressed, honestly. It's like giving it to a good freelancer. So I'm not one of those content people that's like, no, you have to have a human write it. I think that humans are just important, but where we're important again is like what I was saying, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? Like, it's what are the insights. AI is not there yet. They're not going to be able to come up. The robots are not able to come up with the original thought and the insights that an executive is saying when you interview them. But the actual creation, I think, is going to get better and better. And so I'm looking forward to it. But right now, what I say to my team and how I challenge other marketers is just start with, what capabilities how could AI help me with this task? And you'll just find things going quicker, but I mean, I'm really looking forward to, I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to like seeing a lot more in action. It's still, there's just still limitations to AI that can be frustrating sometimes. And I mean, I can't wait, honestly, we talk about all marketing, and like, I went to a marketing conference and all everybody talks about is content creation. I'm really excited for, like, can AI organize my content calendar for me? Can AI, and when is it going to be more at my fingertips to just say, I want to know the engagement of, to ask it to pull analytics and insights from those analytics and stuff like that. I think that's where we're really going to get help. And I know this is possible, but I don't know that it's, a standard tool at everyone's fingertips,
No, totally. And at least on the side of the generation of content, in this particular case, copywriting, something as simple as just talk to a normal person. I think we both, as a person, and also when we use ChatGPT or whichever AI platform to create content, it's like they start talking so, not pretentious, but like in a corporate jargon, that it's unrelatable, so we, and I learned this in my journalism years when we had to train new reporters. They want to talk all corporate. It's like, no, don't use those words. Like, if you're talking to a friend, you're not going to say that, right? So don't write that, because when people read it, it's going to alienate them instead of bringing them together, right? So, for example, we have a list of forbidden words now for us, which are, I open it here, like, enhance, achieve, unlock, boost, robust, solution, effectively, efficiently, strategies, optimize, streamline, all of that is like,
Yeah.
you lost me when I read one of those words, so it's right. And it's like, also be more interesting, maybe say less, but be very, be more sassy. So you can actually tell those things to ChatGPT. We tell ChatGPT, hey, don't use any of these words, be sassy, show personality, don't be boring, right? And give me alternatives, right? So I think at least now that's where we are, and we, I mean, our particular agency and where I am, obviously I still haven't gotten the next layer of gatekeeping that is automated, where you can filter those alternatives and take it to that I'm doing myself right now currently. But at least it's obviously, I agree with you. I'm bullish on AI. I by no means I want to undermine, the help, but you do need to know how to direct it to make the most of it, because otherwise you're, instead of, now you were wasting 100 hours putting out content that wasn't getting you anywhere. Now, yeah, maybe you're doing it less time, but you're still not getting any results out of it, because it lacks personality, it lacks, industry insights, and it lacks really just like a POV that people, they start to know who you are, right? And I agree with you. It needs to have a face and a name behind it, because otherwise it's going to be very, very hard to create a connection.
And what you mentioned about brand voice and style, I think that's where, say, content directors like me, our focus really is going to be more on setting those standards and really setting the voice so that AI can ingest that. And there already are tools, like, to be honest, they're not paying me, but I'll give a shout out to like the tool Jasper AI. I've seen some demos. You can input your voice, your style guide, and honestly, what they end up producing, like based on that, they're following it. It's so I'm like very excited for how that'll become more commonplace. But it's interesting to be like, in my career, having like really taking the time to sit down, it's kind of like the brand messaging framework I was talking about earlier, like sitting down to do your style guide seems like a very like ivory tower luxury task for a content director. Like, I'm going to do the style guide. Like, a lot of times it kind of is like this maybe exists in your head, or it's just like a rudimentary version. I think that's really normal, but I think in the future, as we're using AI tools, it will become more normal for someone like me to be very focused on perfecting the voice and style, because an AI is doing some heavy lifting on the creation side. And so it's going to be such a mixture of structure and creativity, just like it's like all in marketing. I mean, we'll be focused on having those structured standards, and then we'll also be focused on just being highly creative and coming up with interesting ideas that break through the clutter. And that takes, what everything I just said takes mind time. And that is the currency that is hardest for us as marketers, I think, is to find that mind time, to get out of the rat race.
No, but I think that's a great advice actually on where people can start, right? Create or just stress test your current branding guidelines and voice and tone guidelines. Give it to a platform like Jasper, Writer, or even ChatGPT, and say, okay, come up with 10 headlines for this service, right? And see what they come up with, right? And if it's not if you don't agree with it, then you probably need to evolve and continue to adjust those guidelines, because it's like training, the ultimate copywriter for your agency, right? If you fix that problem, if you get to a styling guide that the AIs can understand and leverage, then you're suddenly open a floodgate of valuable, content, right? So that's, I think, a great place to start.
Yeah. And again, it could be strategy through the work, like looking back at just what are the best pieces that you publish that you think encapsulate your voice and tone, and then working backwards on, okay, so what is it about these pieces? How would we describe the tone? here for the style guide, rather than like starting with the style guide. And again, you got to do the strategy through the work. And in AI can also, you can just give them pieces. You can feed in pieces. I want it to sound like this. If you have a one of those pieces that, you'll spend months working on and really perfecting, and you use it all year, like that's the piece to feed to AI and say, I want it to sound like this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a great way. That's a great use of AI as well. Just give them your 3 best pieces and say, hey, I want to write a style guide for you. What do these 3 pieces have in common, and how can I frame this so you create more pieces like this, right? And you'll be surprised of the output that it is going to give you, right? And then you just need to tweak it as opposed to writing it from the start.
And I didn't even realize I'm going to try that after this. I hadn't even.
Yeah.
You just led me to that thought that I hadn't actually thought about. Hey, why don't I just ask AI to make my style book for me based on these pieces? I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, no, I tried a couple, especially for what we call the brand manifesto, that we then create a GPT with it. And it's like, hey, I want to create. I didn't say a manifesto, that's our name, but it's like a description for a GPT that does this. What should I say? And then obviously I assume he's like looking for best practice on how to write that. So, yeah, no, I completely agree. Ellie,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just actually going to ask, if we haven't touched on anything that you'd like to share, with the audience that you think would be valuable and that I perhaps forgot to ask or we didn't get to it.
Oh my goodness. I think we covered a lot of interesting stuff. Just, I think really a theme here has been creativity, and that as marketers, I think we have to fight for that creative space.
Mm-hmm.
Have to, and honestly, you brought up just old school brand and advertising marketing. We have to fight for that Don Draper time, of really being creative, especially in B2B marketing. I think we have to just start treating it more like consumer marketing. We're speaking to other people. We're not speaking to the building. We're not speaking to a company. We're speaking to humans that are trying to get their job done so they can go to their kids' soccer practice. And we need to be more human and creative in that messaging.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing way to wrap it up, I guess, Ellie, because I agree. I was actually talking to someone yesterday about what it takes to be a good marketer and advice for people that are getting into marketing right out of school. And I was actually telling him, you need to be good at something else besides marketing, right? Otherwise, you're probably not going to be a very good marketer. Like if you have marketing as number one thing, I probably don't want you on my team, right? Versus if you're a great artist, if you're a great storyteller, if you're a great, data scientist, if you are a great creating cinema and or simply creating scripts for TV shows, right? And there's something there that you can leverage. But I don't think marketing is just an adaptation of all of those things versus I would say a profession in itself, right? And it's definitely easier to learn perhaps how to use Google Analytics or HubSpot or any of these traditional marketing skills than the other ones that are more come more within your innate self or take a little longer to develop.
Yeah, that is such a great point. Honestly, anyone can learn marketing. We did, we didn't go to school directly for marketing. Anyone can learn and anyways, even if we did, it changes so fast. You have to keep learning. Anyone can learn how to use HubSpot and all this stuff, but you can't learn. What you really need is to be creative. And you're so right. You have to have some other passions outside, which you're making me want to go work on my poetry book or whatever.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah. And also, have a hobby, and in particular, if it's I think competitive sports, that helps a lot, for different reasons.
Work something else besides your brain a little bit, get active.
Do you have any recommendation on a resource or a publisher or a book or a mentor? I guess, I was thinking about related to content and storytelling, but really in general, any of these topics that we have discussed?
Oh my gosh, that's a good one off the top of my head. It's funny, I'm moving, so all of my content marketing books are packed right now, or normally I would have like my favorite ones. There's the okay, sorry, you're not going to want me searching for this on the podcast.
No, you can go ahead and search. Go ahead. Don't worry.
What is the name? There's a book called that I really honestly recommend. Hold on, I'll start over and say it like I just came up because I can't remember the name of the author. I'm terrible.
No worries. Yeah, we'll.
One of the great, just central, like the Bible to creating like a story-driven brand is called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And one of our co-founders actually recommended it to me, and I love it. It's just for any marketer, not just for content marketers, but it's about putting a story at the center of your brand. And it's a simple concept that we all, you have it?
I have, I think, the previous one, right? Is this guy?
Yeah. You know, I actually haven't read The Marketing Made Simple, but yeah, it's Donald Miller. Yeah. And now I'm curious what all those other books are behind you.
I mean, they're not only, you have some about, you know, economic behavior and yeah, different one. Not only about branding.
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to say his name right. Joe Lasacas, I'm probably butchering his name, but he wrote the book, The Storytelling Edge. He used to be at Contently, a content marketing platform, but he writes great stuff on LinkedIn. I'll send you a link.
Okay. Yeah, we'll also when we share the episode on LinkedIn, we'll put his handle there. We'll look it up and we'll include it.
Yeah, I'm always sharing. I'm such a fan kid of him. I definitely met him in New York, and I've heard him speak and stuff. And he has a lot of really interesting stuff to say about content. And one of the best things he says too is just that he's not afraid to say there's too much B2B content marketing out there that's not good. He's not afraid to say that, and it's important for us to look at ourselves and admit that.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you
for being on the podcast. It's been great, so appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been fun. Thank you. It's so nice to meet you.
Thanks for listening to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe for future episodes. Until next time.